Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. This year's election campaign in Germany was fake and boring. I should say boring. There are certain aspects though, when you look at them, you might think, wow, this looks like a really thrilling, interesting, exciting campaign. But actually it was kind of boring. So in today's video I first want to present to you the reasons why I think, and many others think so too, that this election campaign was fake. There was a lot of falsehoods, there was a lot of fakery, a lot of make-believe going on. Especially our public broadcasting, our state media, they were manipulating the truth and spinning everything 100% of the time 24/7. And I want to present some examples to you. And then we get to the boring part. I could have made this video during the actual election campaign before last Sunday, but it doesn't really make a difference, I think. Alright, so before we jump into it, I want to thank all my supporters and all my subscribers. Like, share and subscribe if you like my material, and also check me out on other social media sites. If you want to see more videos like this or more frequently appearing videos, you can support me via Patreon or Subscribestar. The links are in the descriptions down below. Alright, so let's start with the weaker point of why this election was fake. This is more like a side note here on this topic, but as you all know, this was the first federal election, the first election to the Bundestag that was happening in a society where the sense of urgency when it comes to climate questions was really there, and it was on the top of the agenda. In 2017, that was still very different because, as you all know, this hype started in 2018 and peaked in 19. Then it got a little bit forced back from the headlines by the coup, and now it's all back again. And this is why the Green Party and other progressives, why they thought that this time they can really have their big break. And in a way it happened, but not like they planned. You saw a lot of demonstrations and a lot of these speeches were made publicly. In Berlin, I think, for example, like Saint Greta came to Germany and she was criticizing the German parties. And there were even in Berlin, I think, there were some activists who went on a hunger strike and they demanded a meeting with Mr. Scholz, I think, the candidate of the Social Democrats. And yeah, I mean, the guy on the right, he really looks like he hasn't been eating in a long time, but the lady on the left, she just looks tired, but she looks very well fed, so that's weird to me. Maybe they cheated also, I don't know. In the end, they called off their heroic hunger strike, and yeah, Scholz said, I don't have time for you now, but maybe after the election we can meet at some point. And as you can imagine, the media were of course very supportive and totally on their side, and it is not really required that I mention this anymore, but we of course see that the, yeah, you could say at the least that the boundaries between activism and journalism are kind of blurred, but I would even go a step further. I would say that pretty much all journalists who are serving right now for the public and the big corporate media are total activists. They are left-winged agitators. They are making up things. They are running interference for leftist Marxist groups all day long. It is not journalism like the word was defined when I was still in school in the 80s. But of course, this media bias, I mean, it is so extreme that I would say it becomes a fake narrative. It becomes lies. When you're so partial, when you're so one-sided, yeah, it becomes lies in the end. But now we move on to a different topic that is even more extreme and even more clear. I will present to you two examples now where journalists and people who work in the media, they made sure that the CDU candidate, Mr. Armin Laschet, was confronted with activists that were posing as normal, concerned citizens who were just asking a question. They had these events, they were called like Wahlarena or something. It's some sort of a, do you call that town hall meeting? I don't know. It was supposed to be, or it was, this big televised event where the heads of the parties, the main running candidates of the parties, where they were interviewed or where they met with ordinary citizens who asked them some questions. And these people were not ordinary citizens. There were 2 students, for example, school children that were ahead of that interview. They were chosen and trained by a left-winged media organization. It is an activist organization that coaches activists to become visible in the media. So they picked these 2 children and basically told them what to do, what questions to ask, how to react, and how to quote unquote destroy Mr. Laschet. So as you guys know, I don't like the CDU party, I don't like Mr. Laschet, but this is absolute fakery. The people who saw this on TV, all these boomers, I mean young people who have a little bit of understanding how the media works, they don't even watch that, but they're the minority. The majority of voters are people who still watch TV. And when they saw that, they must have thought, oh, these are just 2 concerned students who ask critical and very intelligent questions to Mr. Laschet. And this organization is clearly Marxist, clearly left-winged, and they had the goal to hurt the campaign actively of Mr. Laschet here. And they are, of course, financed by a extremely left-winged organization like Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, and they are connected to a couple of parliamentarians or politicians of the Communist Party Die Linke. And of course, it is only one side that employs these underhanded and fake methods. But this was not the only time that children were used for these Marxists and their agenda. There was another event where once again, so either the head of the party or the chancellor candidates, where they were interviewed by children. And now it was a boy and a girl. And these children, they had these little knobs in their ear. They had these little hardly visible earphones, or they were covered by hair or something like that. It wasn't really visible, but they clearly had some headphone in their ear, and the editors or the journalists in the back, who were not children, who are adults of course, they were telling them what to ask and what to say. And there were always these huge gaps in between answers and questions where you really saw that they were instructed now by some voice in their ear to say something confrontative or surprising, shocking, or mean. And then they wanted to see how Mr. Laschet reacted, and he didn't do very well, as you might imagine. I mean, he came in there expecting actual questions from actual children, but instead he got very Marxist, confrontative questions and more statements rather than questions, like, you're a horrible person and why are you not doing anything for the environment, why can't you behave well in public? And of course, I mean, if they had done that to all the politicians, I wouldn't mind, but they didn't do that to all the politicians. Obviously, they did it to Mr. Laschet. And of course, a whole different point is that questions such as inflation, taxation, immigration, or something like that, that was not really on the agenda at all. It was all about woke questions. It was all about CO2 and climate change, or just personal attacks on their character and on what has basically nothing to do with the kind of politics that they wanted to do later. So there are many more examples, but I want to leave it at that. Now switching to the next topic, the boring part. So when you look at it from the outside, and when you don't know too much about it, and you just look at the polls, you would think that, wow, this was a thriller. I mean, this was really exciting. I mean, look at that. I mean, first the CDU is up, and then the Green Party comes, and then the Green Party drops, and then the SPD comes, the end. And the CDU didn't even do as bad. On the election night, you saw, wow, they're almost equal. I mean, will the CDU come out ahead? Will the Social Democrats come out ahead? Wow, it hasn't been that exciting or that close. The race hasn't been that close in a very long time. So a superficial view might give you the impression that it was pretty exciting, but it was boring. So it was fake, as I said already, and it was boring. Why? Well, my personal opinion is because it doesn't really matter in the end. You know that all, as I said many times, all these parties, the Green Party, the Liberal Party, the SPD, the CDU, CSU, they all agree on the major points. They want to raise our taxes, they want to open the borders, they want to destroy the country, they want to, with these pandemic rules and with the masks and with all that stuff, they have their agenda. It is very clear. They only differ in details, or some of them emphasize this a little more, some emphasize that a little more. When it comes to, transferring all our tax money, well, first of all, stealing all our money in the form of taxes and then transferring it abroad or to foreigners in Germany, well, then they differ in how fast they would wreck Germany, how fast they would accomplish this transfer of resources. They don't disagree at all that it must be done and it will be done, but they want to boil the frog either faster or slower, and you can now decide for yourself what you find more appealing for Germany, but that is the state of affairs. And the only party that differs here is the AfD, but of course they will not rule, they will not win the election, and they will not end up in a coalition for the next couple of years, I think. But nevertheless, I still voted because that is a clear display, that is a sign that you say, I'm not okay with that, this is not in my name. And if you vote for one of these micro parties that doesn't make it into parliament anyway, or if you just stay at home and don't vote, well, then nobody really cares. But the AfD at least does good opposition work and they ask the right questions in parliament. Of course, they're not perfect, but well, that's all we have for the time being. So now I gave you some examples of why this election campaign was fake, probably the fakest that it has ever been in Germany so far, and I gave you my opinion on why I thought it was only exciting on a superficial level, but when you actually look at the details, you see it was quite boring actually. And I'm not really shocked and I'm not really emotionally touched by the results so much. I mean, I don't care. It's not red, red, green, that's for sure, and it probably won't be a new big coalition. It will either be the Liberal Party and the Green Party with the SPD, or those two mid-sized parties with the CDU, Ampel or Jamaica. That's the two options now, I guess, and we will see. It won't be that much difference, I guess. As a taxpayer, I would prefer the Jamaica version because that probably has the largest chance of not having our taxes increased on a enormous level in the next couple of months. They will go up, of course, make no mistake about that, but I think with the Social Democrats in power together with the Green Party, they would raise our taxes even more. That's the only difference I can tell you. The borders, of course. They would, of course, open the borders more radically as the other coalition would probably do. But that's just my estimation. And once again, they differ in degrees only, not fundamentally. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Servus, Kameraden.